car market in Mogadishu.
NATO's military success against
many Western nations.
This is On Assignment.
Hey everybody, and welcome to the show. As usual, we've got lots of behind-the-scenes reporting for you. I'm Alex Villarreal.
And I'm Imran Siddiqui. We go first to the Middle East, where our correspondent got a first-hand look at life for the millions of people forced to flee Islamic State militants.
Ukraine's uprising 1 year later, our Moscow correspondent gives us the views from both sides of the Russia-Ukraine border.
The Cricket World Cup is underway in New Zealand and Australia. We talk with a VOA expert about the sport and the tournament.
Then piano plummet. Sales of the instrument have declined across the U.S., but can Asian Americans save the stores?
Pull up a bench, get out your music, and let's play On Assignment. The offensives by Islamic State militants in Syria and Iraq have displaced millions of people. Aside from physical pain and loss, psychiatrists say as many as half the people on the run from the militants may be suffering psychological effects from their ordeal.
VOA correspondent Scott Bobb recently traveled to camps for the displaced in northern Iraq and Turkey to chronicle the suffering of the refugees. Here's what he told me about what he saw.
Suruc Camp in southeastern Turkey. It's Turkey's newest and largest camp, with a capacity of 60,000 people. In the 3 weeks since it opened, 5,500 people have already moved in.
Scott, you visited refugee camps in both Turkey and Iraq. How are people holding up?
It's very difficult because of the winter weather. It's cold and rainy, sometimes snowing, and so it's very difficult. I would say the refugees in Turkey are better supplied. Some of them have heaters that have been furnished by the government or the aid agencies. The food is a bit better. In Iraq, it's still not too bad, although it varies from camp to camp, frankly. And the influx just in the last 6 to 7 months of the Yazidis and other groups following the ISIS or Islamic State offensive.
Arzam Ghassan Khalef is one of the newest residents. She and her 23-year-old daughter Asima were among 200 Yazidis released unexpectedly by the militants. She says that Asima was traumatized after being shot and beaten over the head with cement bricks.
She always talks to herself and nobody can understand. I wish someone could take her to another country for treatment. I'm tired.
When you're doing a story like this, of course, we are trained to be objective, but how can you not be emotionally affected?
It's very difficult, and actually you often afterwards is when you try to compartmentalize and you just do your job, and your training helps, asking questions and trying to be sensitive and not, if you see them getting disturbed, you don't go any further, for example. But then you have to deal with it later, and this is why afterward you try to put it off until you're done with the assignment.
10-year-old Zainab is angry at the Islamic State, known here as Daesh, for driving her family and friends from their homes.
First we lost our school, then Daesh took our homes. They must be pushed back so we can go back to our houses.
In the shot that you took, the interview shot of the young girl, there's another little girl that you can see off in the corner, and she's just kind of looking curiously at what you're doing. Is that characteristic of how children and other refugees responded to you when you were there?
Again, it varies. Usually the children are more open. Of course, many of them are bored. They're not in school, so this is an entertainment for them, especially among the Syrian children. Even those who are not refugees that I encountered in Syria, they love the camera, and they love to be on camera, and they'll do the victory sign and chant and do whatever they can to be on the camera.
Now, there's a clear enemy here right now for many of these refugees, which is the Islamic State militants. What did they tell you about how they're feeling toward the group and the reasons for them having to leave their homes?
For the most part, intense anger coupled with fear and anxiety for their missing loved ones.
My kids are still in their hands. 17 members of my family. We are all poor and helpless. We can do nothing.
When you talk to these refugees, what is their primary message to you? What is their hope that will happen to help get them out of this situation?
Often it their hope is pinned on the international community. They feel that there should be more airstrikes against their enemies. They feel that ground troops of any kind is fine, anything to get rid of these invaders as they see it and allow them to go home.
We hope they will liberate our region and our people will be freed from the hands of Islamic State.
This is the trauma of any victim, innocent civilian who's enveloped in a war, and it takes years sometimes for them to finally adjust to the new situation.
A very difficult situation to adjust to indeed. Thanks so much to Scott for his insights.
And next to another difficult situation in the world, the Ukraine conflict. When Ukraine marked in February the first anniversary of the Euromaidan uprising that toppled this Russia-leaning president, thousands of demonstrators in Moscow held what they called an anti-Maidan march.
The opposing demonstrations are just another example of the deep divisions we're seeing between Ukrainians and Russians. VOA's Daniel Sheriff has covered the Ukraine conflict from both sides of the border. Tell us about this protest that you covered in Moscow.
Yes, the anti-Maidan group helped to organize a large protest march that went through the center of Moscow. Thousands of people. They say they had about 50,000 people. The authorities estimated somewhere around 30,000 people. And this was a counter march to the Maidan uprising anniversary that was taking place in Kiev, basically expressing their view that the Maidan uprising against Yanukovych was a coup, was a lot of them believe was organized by the United States, by the European Union. There are a lot of conspiracy theories that they put forward.
Now let's flip to the other side of the Maidan protests and talk about the Ukrainian views.
More than 5,300 people have died in eastern Ukraine since April, most of them civilians caught in the crossfire. At the Kramatorsk Memorial, some hold signs blaming Russian President Vladimir Putin, accused by the West of arming the rebels, a charge he denies. City Council member Volodymyr Ryzhavsky calls the Kramatorsk attack a crime against humanity.
Ukraine is bleeding. How many innocent victims will the world need to stop the aggressor and make him answer?
Daniel, you mentioned the civilian deaths and some of the video that you got. You showed bodies under blankets and various things. I mean, when you come upon a scene like that, what are your thoughts? What goes through your head?
Well, in a situation where there are rockets falling on the place where you are, of course, your biggest concern is always safety. And so we, immediately put on our helmets and flak jackets when we heard about the attack on the city. And being concerned about where you step is, of course, an issue if there is unexploded ordnance possibly nearby. So we try to tread as carefully as possible. And also in a situation where civilians have been killed, where people's cars and homes have been hit with explosives flying from the sky, people are scared and they're upset and they're angry, and it's difficult to approach people as a journalist. You don't want to be offensive or anything like this, but you do want to hear from them. You want to give them a voice to express their anger, to express what they feel when their peaceful neighborhood becomes part of a war zone.
And you also spoke to people who have been forced to flee their homes. What are they feeling right now?
A lot of fear.
Raisa Nichayeva and her granddaughter share a room with another family displaced by fighting in eastern Ukraine. Since July, they have lived at the Holy Mountains Lavra and Cave Monastery in Svetohirsk, which now houses 700 displaced people. The Lavra is a godsend for families like Nichayeva's, whose apartment and hometown of Horlivka continue to be devastated by shelling.
I live in a high-story building. My son stayed there. He's not going anywhere. All the windows are broken, the balcony is destroyed, and when we call him, he says he is shaking and sitting in the bathroom.
So what is it going to take then for this fighting to end for good?
Well, that's the big question. Unfortunately, I think we're going to have to see a lot more effort amongst the world leaders than we've seen so far. We're going to have to see some more substantial and fundamental offers being placed on the table than what's been achieved. In order for Ukraine to take back control of that border, which is envisioned by this agreement, they're going to have to give up that control. And that's going to be very difficult for the rebel side and for Russia to accept.
Yeah, it's something we'll all be watching closely, and Daniel will, of course, continue to follow the conflict as our Moscow correspondent.
We're taking a break now, but when we come back, a look at one of the most enduring exports of the British Empire. You're watching On Assignment. The Cricket World Cup is being co-hosted in New Zealand and Australia this year. The tournament is held every 4 years, just like the Soccer World Cup, and is one of the world's most viewed sporting events. And to talk about this, joining me right now is Bangla Service Chief Rokia Haider. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for asking me.
What I wanted to find out is that, we have like superstars of basketball and of football. Are cricket stars like superstars in their countries?
Of course, Imran, you know that cricket is a big sport in all over South Asia, in Europe, in Australia, New Zealand and in England, from where we learned cricket, but of course, again and again, England is being defeated. There are superstars, South Asian, right now and in the past, Imran Khan, Sourav Ganguly, Inzamul Haq and Sunil Gavaskar. Now Bangladesh's Saqib Al Hasan, Mushfiq bin Murtaza. So these are all big names.
What do you think about, you just mentioned that, it was, cricket was started and exported by England, and yet they've never won any matches. Australia has won a couple of them.
4 times.
But what do you think about nations that are powerhouses in cricket? How would you describe them? Countries?
Right now?
Yeah.
Well, right now, if you look at the cricket field, in the world, in Test cricket or ODI, it's mostly India and Australia. West Indies, we thought that it's a very powerful team, but it is Pakistan, as Pakistan is always termed unpredictable. So right now, West Indies is in the same group. South Africa is a very good team, and Sri Lanka is a very good team. India is very stable.
So it's like a sport that was developed by the Europeans is now big in South Asia. How did that happen?
Indians, 200 years of British rule. India, Bangladesh, Pakistan, wherever you say. And of course, cricket, at that time, it used to be Test cricket, 5 days. But gradually, as the world changed and they wanted the quick results, so it evolved that in 1975, they came up with World Cup cricket, and it used to be 60 overs. Then they changed it into 50 overs. And that's how it's growing, it's evolving with the changes in the world.
Yeah, it's like a Christmas holiday when once the cricket matches go on, everyone goes home and watches them. But how much do you think, for example, a country that hosts the World Cup, do you think it's like a massive business boom for that country also?
Of course. You have noticed with, why do you think that FIFA is so renowned all over the world? So is International Cricket Group, this
ICC.
Cricket Committee, ICC, because it is commercial, always it's commercial.
Thank you so much for taking the time out.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for being here. We're taking a break now, but when we come back, the plight of the piano and why Asian Americans might be the solution. You're watching On Assignment.
The piano has been a common sight in American homes for a very long time, but sales have declined across the country as demand for full-size acoustic pianos has slowed and fewer children are learning to play.
Pianos are still popular with Asian Americans who remain important customers for the industry, but will that be enough to save piano stores? Lin Yang of VOA's Mandarin service visited one store where the music is about to stop playing. She shares her story with On Assignment's Rebecca Ward.
On a Wednesday afternoon in College Park, Maryland, the staff at Piano Liquidation Center is busy as usual fixing pianos. Leading them is owner Nick Magrides, a 40-year veteran of the industry who is worried for his future.
It's a really big piano store. It's actually the biggest in the DC area. And the owner decided that now it's really not a lot of people buying, so it's going out of business.
Not a lot of people buying here in the United States, but
yes.
elsewhere.
Elsewhere, yes, particularly in Asia or China, those markets. And the owner mentioned about Asian Americans here. They're actually picking up the sales versus, a lot of people are doing more like sports and other things.
Well, let's talk about Asia, for example. Why do you think, especially China, why do you think piano playing is so popular there?
It has several reasons. First of all, the owner, Mr. Magrides, he actually did a comparison for European immigrants who come to the country 100 years ago. At that time, piano playing is something for the upper class. And when they come here, they're like, wow, it's the land of freedom and we can do that for our kids. They want their kids to have what they cannot have when they're growing up. And the same thing happened in China now. For people, in their 40s, 30s, and when they're growing up, it's the time of Cultural Revolution in China and the beginning of economic reform, the open up. So they've seen all this Western instruments and piano, music things, but they don't have the chance to experience it. So they really, really want their kids to experience what they don't have. It's the same for Asian Americans and Chinese people today, even Chinese people in China, because the economy has been picking up and people have a lot of disposable income. They can afford to invest in their kids. I'm sure you've heard about tiger moms and things like that. Chinese parents will not hold back when they're buying music lessons or invest in recitals, practice sessions for their kids, because education is it's the most important thing.
Thinking about all the interest, time, patience, and hard work, Angelica put in the piano practice, we will support her, without any hesitance in either time-wise or financially.
Well, I confess I took piano lessons when I was a kid, but I didn't like my piano teacher,
okay.
so I stopped. Yeah. But you also took piano lessons.
I did since I was 3:30. So it's.
And your mom didn't let you stop.
My mom, she's she's very persistent, and she sits with me every day when I was playing piano for 10 years, I would say, and I remember other kids will be playing outside and I will play piano at least for 2 to 3 hours a day.
So the gentleman you spoke to in Maryland and his piano store going out of business, but he's still retaining some business?
He has another store in Baltimore, so now he's gonna focus on used pianos. Because he said the trend is even a lot of Americans will choose to buy a keyboard for their kids before they see if there's talent or there's potential. But for the new piano market or the high-end piano market like Steinway, it's mainly in Asia right now, and that's where the market is growing.
So let's talk a little bit about the Tiger Mom syndrome and music. Is the hope that they actually, become like a classical pianist, or they just want that background?
They really don't want their kids to pursue this as their career because everyone knows it's really hard for a pianist to, get famous or get people to know them. It's just, I think it has to do with advertisement too. It's, king of all instrument, and people just think it's so fancy. It's a symbol of being educated. So, and it's a way to spend quality time with your mom. So.
It's really sad to think something so classic could ever be something we consider now to be out of style, and I think back to my own days of piano lessons and just remembering playing on a real piano and how that just did not compare to the keyboard I had at home.
Just like you can't compare an acoustic guitar to an electric.
Yeah, the whole thing, feel, sound, everything's different.
Yeah. All right. Well, speaking of classic hobbies, our next story involves that tried and true pastime of horseback riding. In Jackson Hole, Wyoming, a man who's been making saddles for over 20 years showed Anna Simon's Philip Alexio some of the secrets of the trade. Take a look.
Keith Vallee always wanted to be a cowboy, inspired at a young age by Charlie Russell, an artist of the old American West.
And just the Western art kept my interest in the cowboy life. The stories that he wrote about and the adventures that he documented always kept my interest into the Western way of life and the cowboys.
For a long time, Vallee worked on a ranch, but after enough cold, hard winters as a ranch hand and a few sore joints, Vallee's heart settled on saddle making.
Back in like '94 when I made my first saddle, and I was working horses and had ordered a saddle from a gentleman. It was just, in my mind, it was just taking him too long. So I just made the deal with him that if he gives me the supplies, we'd call it good, and then I would build it myself. So that's how I got started.
Vallee made about 12 saddles before he decided to go to Sheridan, Wyoming, an area known for saddle making. He's made more than 60 saddles since then, promoting his work through word of mouth and his website, where he keeps a close eye on his web traffic.
The majority of my business is anywhere from California to Florida. It's amazing to see how some marketing that you think is going to work really well, not worth anything, and then like Facebook comes along and you're like, that can't work, and it's phenomenal.
Saddle making used to be a guarded craft.
Well, some of the saddle makers were so secretive of their trade that when they knew someone was coming into their shop, before anybody could come in, they would throw a cover over their project so nothing could be seen of what they were doing.
But things are different now in the information age, and Vallee offers tips on his website, including a video guide on leather tooling. Inside his shop, Vallee's pride and love for saddle making is evident in the details.
This particular style, you can see the shape of the seat looks like a shovel. So that's what they call a shovel back, and it's high. This style is a little more traditional. It's quite a bit wider. We'll start with a handmade tree, a wood base, and then rawhide finished.
Hole punches, half punches, stencils, hammers, leather, and rawhide, all tools of the trade.
One of the goals I have in putting a seat in a saddle is to cradle the pin bones and help support the center of the rider.
There's about 84 pieces of leather needed to complete a saddle, and custom-made saddles cost thousands of dollars.
The true horseman wants to feel as much as he can of the horse to where they know where every foot is hitting.
In the old days, people would pay 10 times for a saddle what they paid for a horse. Today, that trend is reversed. So here's what I can tell you about a Keith Vallee saddle. You just feel more secure, you don't bounce around as much, and it's got that custom feel. So obviously there's a big difference.
I will have to say, most of the owners of the saddles I have built, they turn into really good friends.
Keith Vallee, a true American cowboy, making friends and making saddles one at a time. Philip Alexio, VOA News.
And now he can add Phil to that list of friends, can he?
Yeah, he was looking pretty cool out there, and it's amazing to see the craft still surviving.
It is, and you're right. Phil looked very comfortable on that saddle. Really nice to see. Well, with that, we are about to ride off into the sunset ourselves, but next week we'll be back with a look at how the thawing of U.S.-Cuba relations will affect the economies of both countries.
And that's just our first of many stories next week. You can find all of our episodes at voanews.com and all the top world news out there too.
Thanks for watching, everybody. Goodbye until next time.